Victorian dairy producers are trialling natural food additives to improve dairy conditions and reduce their carbon footprint. New research conducted in Victoria indicates that adding fat supplements to cattle feed could reduce methane emissions by 15 to 20%. With each grazing dairy cow burping up to 600 grams of methane per day, researchers, extension officers and farmers are working on ways to reduce these emissions without compromising animal production and costs.
The Australian livestock industry have been quite good at improving their efficiency over time, and we can see that through a range of breeding, feeding and animal management practices, the emissions intensity of livestock production has actually decreased steadily over the last 40 years. In particular, the dairy industry can show some quite large gains in the amount of milk produced per litre of methane produced. What we've now got to do is turn that around and look for ways to reduce the net amount of methane coming from the industry as well.
Dr. Richard Eckard is Director of the Primary Industries Climate Challenges Centre at the University of Melbourne. He heads this project as part of the Reducing Emissions from Livestock research program, which receives funding through the Australian Government's Climate Change Research Program.
The aim of the research here was to look at practical ways to reduce methane from dairy cattle in this case. Dairy cattle have the advantage of being fed in the dairy nearly every day, and so there's practical options to add something to their diet that will reduce methane. In the case of the experiment here, we looked at a range of different feed supplements, including dietary oils. There was some evidence that dietary oils can reduce methane, and we tried a range of different oil seeds, oil sources, whole cottonseed oil, cold-pressed canola, hominy meal, a range of oils, and we found a consistent reduction in methane from these if fed on a daily basis. And so for every 1% extra oil we added into the diet of the animal, we'd get about a 3.5% reduction in methane. And that's something tangible that farmers can do right now practically and can respond to an initiative like the Carbon Farming Initiative by feeding these oils if they are cost effective.
One of the examples of the byproducts that we fed is cold-pressed canola. This is a byproduct from the production of biodiesel. It's had some of the fat taken out, but there's still 10% fat in this product as it is. We can substitute this into the diet of dairy cows while they're being fed during milking to lift the fat in their diet and reduce their methane.
Dr. Eckard says while adding fats and oils to cattle feed appears to be a promising way to reduce emissions and increase production, it's most valuable when pasture is scarce and low in nutritional value.
Obviously during the spring period, the pasture has a high nutritional value and has a high natural oil content. So there's not much more we can add during the spring period. But during the summer in most of Victoria, the natural oil content is down around 1%, 1.5%. And so there's a window to add a significant amount of oil during the summer and reduce methane during that period. And that also brings energy into the diet, improving milk production at a time when you need additional energy.
Here at DPI Ellenbank we have two ways to measure the methane emissions of cows. Behind me are our calorimeters. They have two chambers. Each chamber holds one cow. Air is drawn out of those chambers at about 1800 litres a minute, and we send it off to sampling in our analyser. An alternative to our chamber technique is something called the SF6 technique. This involves putting a harness on each individual cow. Breath is sampled at just a point just above her nose, drawn up into a stainless steel canister, and this canister is then taken across to gas chromatograph for analysis.
Dairy farmer Graham Nicol runs Montrose Dairy, a pasture-based dairy farm at Fish Creek in South Gippsland. His cows produce around 2 million litres of milk each year.
We milk around 280 cows in a pasture-based system where we have a strong focus on pasture utilisation.
Graham is a 2009 Nuffield Scholar and is committed to a vibrant future for dairy farmers and dairying regions. He's travelled overseas to explore ways to evolve his dairy farm at Montrose.
We've been feeding fats and oils in our dairy for probably 5 or 6 years. We started doing it to reduce the dust in the dairy. We use recycled vegetable oil or used vegetable oil that we add into the grain after the grain's crushed that goes into our feed mix that cows are fed in the dairy. It's applied just a drip into the auger and mixed in an auger as it goes up into the feed system. So it's just an automated system that runs when the feed system's running.
He said although he is interested in the research, he wouldn't necessarily add fats to a cow's diet simply to reduce methane.
When we first started using oil in the dairy, we were aware there was some talk of methane reduction back then, and that's an added bonus, I guess, of using it, but it's not the primary reason why we are using it. So we buy the oil in 1,000-litre lots. It's costing us around $1,000, so $1 a litre at the moment. It has increased in price a bit over the last few years, just with food prices going up, I think. And it's probably not an economic thing to do as an energy source at the moment. It has been at some times in the past for us. So it's something we do for other reasons, and so we get an economic benefit out of having happy staff in the dairy. I think there's huge opportunities in the dairy industry to feed fats and oils to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Unlike more expansive grazing industries, we've got our cows in the dairy twice a day, so it's easy to add those additives to their diet. But what we really need is an economic driver to help us change to feeding oils in the dairy. At the moment, the only benefit is a benefit of reduced dust in the dairy to us as on a financial front. So if there's economic benefit to do it, the change will be adopted a lot quicker.
The really important thing is to take the research from where we're at and to have it practically applied on farm. We do that through a number of different mechanisms. One, we work with farmers through our extension services within the Department of Primary Industries to communicate the benefits and the message of feeding dietary oils for both reducing methane and productivity. We're also working through to the development of Carbon Farming Initiative offset methods. These are methods that would describe a protocol by which farmers can follow to feed oils, reduce methane and get a credit from the government through the Carbon Farming Initiative.
This study forms part of a larger program to develop a suite of strategies livestock producers in southeastern Australia can use to reduce methane emissions. This research has been funded by the Australian Government through the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry to help prepare Australia's primary industries for climate change and build the resilience of Australia's agricultural sector.